Hi, everyone. My name is Mary McFadden, and I'm going to be hosting today's webinar. I am the Communications and Science Outreach Specialist for the Southern Rockies LCC. Our webinar today is on the funding opportunity for the Desert and Southern Rockies Landscape Conservation Cooperatives. With us today is a team from the Bureau of Reclamation and the LCCs that will be presenting and answering your questions. The presentation part of this webinar will be about 20 minutes or so, and that will provide lots of time for your questions. Just to let you know, everybody is on mute for now. After the presentation, you'll be able to ask questions by phone or by typing those questions into the chat box and sending them to the Science Application Host, and that's me. We do plan, or I should say, we are recording this webinar, and I hope to send a link to everyone who's registered in the next week or so, or before that. Avra Morgan, who's with the Bureau of Reclamation, will kick off the webinar. Welcome, Avra.
Hi there. So this is Avra Morgan, and I'm with the Bureau of Reclamation in the Policy Office. And I'm going to introduce a couple of the other folks that are on the line that are going to help us with the presentation today. We have Ethan Rutledge, who also works in the policy office with me on some of these grant programs. Ethan, you want to say hello?
Hello, everyone.
We also have Janine Koza, and she is a financial assistance expert. She works with us answering a lot of the kind of more technical questions about financial assistance and how to apply for these grants. Janine, can you say hello?
Hello, everyone.
John Rice. We have John Rice here from the Southern Rockies LCC. He is the science coordinator. John?
Hello, everybody.
And then Amanda Webb is also on the line. She's a research specialist with the Desert LCC, and I'm hoping that if you all have questions at the end that are specific to the two LCCs, Amanda and John can answer your questions. Amanda, are you there?
I am. Hello.
Hi. Okay, so with that, I think we can go ahead and get started. Mary, anything else before we dive in?
Nope, I think we're all set to go.
Okay, sounds good. So we're here to talk about the funding opportunity announcement for 2017 for applied science grants for the Desert and Southern Rockies Landscape Conservation Cooperatives. Let's see, so if any of you have been paying attention in past years, we've done a separate funding opportunity, one for each of the two LCCs, but this time around we combined them, and I'm pretty happy about this. I think it makes more sense, and a lot of the priorities for the two LCCs are similar, so I think this will work out well and be a little more efficient and maybe easier for applicants to figure out where they fit as well. So we're going to walk through about, I think there's 11 slides, so it's not a terribly long presentation. And we're going to just give you kind of an overview of who's eligible, funding amount, project types, criteria, and then we're also going to provide some tips or advice on kind of things to think about as you're preparing your proposal. At the end, we'll have an opportunity to ask questions. As Mary mentioned, you can either do that online or through the phone at the end of the presentation. I think we have at least an hour, about an hour for this, so there will be plenty of time to ask questions at the end. So as I mentioned, this is a joint application for the Desert and Southern Rockies, and I should point out that the projects are intended to benefit resource managers within the boundaries of the two LCCs. That doesn't mean that an applicant has to be located physically within the LCC, but the project needs to be directed at benefiting those resource managers within the LCC. So who is eligible? It's pretty broad, actually. States, tribes, irrigation districts, water districts, universities, nonprofit research institutions, organizations with water or power delivery authority, or nonprofit organizations. That's a little more broad than Reclamation typically has our funding opportunities available to, and we're pleased that you know, in working with the LCCs, we want to try to make our funding accessible to beyond, I guess, our usual customers. Reclamation, I should have maybe pointed this out at the beginning in case you're not as familiar with us, but we're a water management agency, and we typically work with irrigation and water districts and municipalities and different water providers. Working with the LCC, we get to extend outward a little bit and partner up with some other folks that are interested in different aspects of water resources management. So we have a nice broad set of eligible applicants. I will mention that other federal agencies are not in and of themselves eligible to apply. They can partner with an eligible entity, and it is possible, and I have had this question actually, for an eligible entity to apply and partner with another federal agency, and that eligible recipient can subcontract to the federal agency. That's fine if an applicant wants to hire another federal agency to do some of the work on the project, that is allowable. Next slide. Okay, funding amount. So we have a total of about $800,000 available for award under this FOA. We're limiting the amount for each individual project to $100,000 in federal funding per project. And as noted here, the project must be completed within 2 years from the date of award. So you need to think about that if you're thinking about your schedule. The way that these funding opportunities work is applicants typically have, the application period is somewhere around 60 days, and then there's a review period where Reclamation is putting together an application review committee to review the proposals. We actually announce the selections. We probably do that in sometime around June. And then we begin the process of entering into a financial assistance agreement with those entities that have been selected for award. So actual award may not occur until later in the summer or early fall. There is a cost share contribution required. So anyone that is applying needs to be able to demonstrate that they are contributing at least 50% of the total project cost, so 50-50 cost share. If you're requesting $100,000, then you need to be able to show that you're contributing $100,000 either in cash or in in-kind services towards a project, and that all has to go in the budget. Next slide. Project types. So the funding opportunity has a pretty detailed description of the different types of projects that are eligible for funding. It's on about pages 10, 11, 12 of the funding opportunity if you're looking at that. And there are 3 task areas or eligible project type areas. The first one is applied research to inform resource decision-making related to drought resiliency. If you look at the funding opportunity announcement, you'll see that there are examples listed under each of these project types, and those can be really helpful. I definitely suggest taking a good look at those examples that are listed there. It's not intended to be an exclusive list, but it is intended to give you a good idea of what kinds of things we think fit. So this first one, applied research to inform resource decision-making related to drought resiliency. We're looking for projects that help fill or involve research to help fill data gaps or analyze data, and the results need to support informed decisions by resource managers within the LCCs. I guess the bottom line here is this is applied research, and by that we mean that the results should be useful to resource managers. It should be in a form that can actually be used upon conclusion of the project. Task B is to develop a synthesis of information and develop related decision support tools to inform watershed management decisions. So this task B really has 2 parts to it. One is a synthesis of information, existing information, And that can include data, spatial information, adaptive management strategies, methodologies, lesson learned, or monitoring practices that will help resource managers address basically watershed management issues on rivers, streams, springs, riparian, and aquatic ecosystems and reservoirs. So the synthesis of information is intended to inform resource managers about, these are some examples from the funding opportunity, perhaps prioritizing areas for conservation or controlling invasive species, or improving economic opportunities such as recreation or for fishing or bird watching or boating, increasing resilience to drought, improving native fish habitat, improving water quality or reducing sediment loading, and restoring or conserving resources of cultural significance to tribes. Those are just some of the examples. There are others listed there in the funding opportunity. And that's the first part of this. Any project that comes in under Task B needs to include two parts, a synthesis and then also the development of a related decision support tool. So based on the information that's synthesized, we're expecting the applicants to develop a tool to help resource managers use that information and identify adaptation strategies or conservation practices to improve watershed resilience. So, for example, that could include the development of a spatially enabled decision support tool to identify and prioritize conservation efforts. That's one example. The third task area there is to develop tools and information to improve the use of water resources data to inform management decisions. So that last one there isn't really focused on the development of a tool or information that's going to be useful to resource managers regarding sharing water resources data. And again, there are examples listed in the funding opportunity, but one example is a project that would be eligible could be enhancing the Desert LCC environmental flows database by developing additional decision support tools that help resource managers balance competing water needs, or developing a water resources dashboard for the LCCs that's like a one-stop location for resource management information. Those are just a couple examples. I think next slide. Okay, and at this point, I'm going to turn over the presentation to Ethan Rutledge, and he's going to walk you through the evaluation criteria and also some kind of tips for applying if you're submitting a proposal.
Hello, everyone. This is Ethan. Okay, and so Reclamation convenes an application review committee, which consists of experts from around the West and different topics who come together to evaluate all the proposals. And they evaluate the proposals based on the criteria shown here. The first criteria we have, criteria A, project benefits, worth 40 points, and the most points out of any of the criteria. So it consists of, well, just the first part here is really describing the resource management issues that your proposal or that your project will address, discussing that issue and discussing the benefits that should come from the project in addressing that issue. So when describing this, you'll want to make sure you explain the significance of the issue to the area, and including how severe and what some of the impacts are, and how your project specifically will address some of those benefits, and how it will result in information or tools that resource managers in the area can use to address that issue. You'll want to include, the geographic scope of the issue that you're addressing. Will it be in one of the LCCs? Will it be in both the LCCs? Will it be in some of the areas outside the LCC, but including some areas within the LCC? And also, you want to just describe here whether or not the benefits from the project will affect multiple resource areas and sectors, such as, will it benefit the environmental sector, agricultural, municipal, or only one of those, with projects that benefiting more sectors will, will be better than those that are maybe narrowly focused. And second here we have, will the project result in actionable science? So this is to be sure, this is to make sure that, the project's not your own personal pet project, but that it will result in benefits that resource managers across the LCCs can use to improve the issue that you're addressing. And so you'll want to be sure to include information on support from resource managers for this project. It's recommended that you provide letters of support from any resource managers that have stated they will benefit from the project or who have committed to participate in the proposed project. And you'll also want to talk about whether not upon completion of the project, will the resource management actions immediately be able to be put into place, or will additional work be required after your project is completed? Second up, worth 20 points, is planning efforts that support the project. So here you're going to, you want to say how prior planning efforts in the LCC or in the region that you're focused support the issue and project that you are addressing. And this can be a land management plan, a drought plan, a data needs plan, or any other relevant plan within the study area. And you'll want to state how your project fits within that planning effort. Is it mentioned for example, is it mentioned in the plan as something that needs to be looked into further, or is it just broadly one of the areas that was focused in the plan? Also, you'll want to look into of existing efforts within the LCC. Applicants should make a reasonable effort to look at all the related ongoing projects within the LCC to ensure that they are not duplicating or complicating those other efforts. So be sure that you look into those. And if you look in FOA, there's information on where to find some of those other projects. So I would advise looking into that. Next, we have project implementation. And right here, I see it says 20 points here, but I'm looking in the FOA, and actually it's only worth 15 points. So I'm not sure what that happened, but so project implementation is how you can convince the ARC, the Application Review Committee, that you will proceed in producing your project within the 2-year allotted time frame, how to make sure that you have a plan to conduct all the research that you have to do and get all the information out in time. And things in here you want to include are a detailed budget to make sure you've thought about how you will go ahead and perform the work, scheduled with all that has information on the major task and milestones and the dates, the rough dates for when they'll be completed. In this section of your proposal, make sure you describe the quality and availability of the data and models that you'll use if that's relevant to the project, as well as you should be able to identify the staff with appropriate credentials and experience that are going to be working on the project. Next, we have the dissemination of results. And so this criteria is going to be used to look at how you plan to get the results, the benefits, the information from your project out there, so resource management users can actually look at it and when they're and inform how they will do the work that will improve the issue that you're looking at. So you could describe the data, tools, guidelines, everything that you will be, how you will get that out, how you get the knowledge out that you've produced, and describe what sort of presentations or webinars that you anticipate to give regarding the results of the project. I think it's recommended that you try to do as much as you can to make sure that people know what you're doing, and to explain why what you're choosing to do is the best way to get users that information. finally, the nexus to reclamation. This is, reclamation wants to get, if possible, a benefit out of what they're doing, out of the money that they're providing. So this is just a way for you to describe how your project might benefit reclamation, such as, will a reclamation project benefit from increased water or the increased resources, the vegetation management, or whatever the benefit is that your project will produce. How can a reclamation gain from that? Continuing on, now we're going to talk just a little bit about information that you should think about when writing your proposals to make it easier for the ARC to evaluate your proposals. We've conducted many ARCs for LCCs and other programs, and so we know by this point what makes a good proposal and what does not. And so this is just general advice to make your proposal look better, stand out, or compared to others. And first, we have here, and I've got an example here from a drought plan, which from our drought contingency planning funding opportunity to go over. But this first piece of advice is to please copy and paste the appropriate criterion from the FOA above your response to that criterion. So when looking over the FOA, do exactly what it has here. You see how they have criterion A, need for a drought contingency plan or update. So you would do the same here with project benefit, and for criterion A, you copy and paste it directly from the FOA right there. That way the ARC knows where to look to evaluate how your proposal addresses that criteria. And also make sure that to the best of your ability, the information that addresses that criteria is contained within that section, and it's not spread throughout, your proposal. So they can really just pinpoint where to go for each of that. Next up is, this is important, and I meant to mention it earlier in the project benefit section, but for any claim that you make in your proposal, please be sure to provide detailed support, such as references to other studies that support, the claims. Claims that are not supported might not be considered, they won't be considered as strongly as ones that are. And so this is an example from a different drought plan. This is a good example where they highlight the studies that support their claims. You see the risk to water supplies addressed in the plan update. In that third line, they reference the Colorado River Basin study, which is another reclamation study that identifies the risk of periodic shortages to water supply in the upper basin and adjacent areas. Later on, they cite climate data from the NOAA that shows temperatures in Utah and Intermountain West are increasing, and they provide links to that data. So this is a much better response than if they had said the same thing without the reference. Okay, continuing on, and I believe we'll send it back to Avra to talk about the budget. Avra?
Yeah, sounds good. So just a couple more slides here. We wanted to say a few things about the budget because we find that this is sometimes difficult for people, and it's helpful to us if the budget is fairly detailed. And by that, we really mean, breaking out the different costs that are going to support your project so that you're not providing lump sums or as shown here, there's cost by unit and quantity. In this case, they're breaking down the cost by hourly rate for the different types of folks that are going to be working on the project. They've got the program manager, the project engineer, GIS analyst, et cetera. And they're showing, for each one of those, how much per hour and how many hours. And this is just an estimate. It does not need to be, we're not going to hold you to this, dollar for dollar when we're actually developing the cooperative agreement. But we want an estimate that we can use to make sure that you have something supporting your project costs And, you know, the project cost typically will not change when the cooperative agreement is formulated, but within what you have identified as your project cost, there may be some shifting around that can occur. But for the purposes of reviewing your proposal, we really need you to break down those costs so that we can see what you're talking about, not just providing the lump sums or the general position. And, you know, if you're going to have a contractor, for example, your narrative should clearly explain what the contractor is going to work on, what the tasks are for the work proposed. Another common problem that we see occasionally is that folks forget that their budget must include both the federal share and the non-federal share. So as I mentioned before, it's a 50-50 cost share, and you need to ensure that your budget includes the entire project, which is, you know, if it's $100,000 that you're requesting from the federal government, it would include that, and if you're contributing $100,000 to match, it would break down the cost for that as well. So it's both parts. Ethan? Okay, these are just some frequently asked questions regarding kind of cost issues related to the projects that we get. Indirect costs. Can indirect costs be included? Sometimes people are confused about this, and if so, how do you determine the amount of indirect costs? The answer is yes, indirect costs can be included. If you have previously negotiated an indirect cost rate with the federal government, then you need to use that rate. If you've never entered into an indirect cost rate agreement, there is a rule that the applicant can use a de minimis 10% of the modified total direct costs instead of a negotiated indirect cost agreement. And I won't go into any more detail on that. If you have questions afterwards, we can elaborate. Parallel projects. This is also really common. So, you know, folks are working on multiple things, and there may be a project that you think, hey, this is going to contribute to the project that I want to apply for under this FOA. Can you use the costs related to that, and we might call it a parallel project. That parallel project, can you include that as part of your cost share? And the answer is, it depends. You may be able to if the type of work that's involved in the parallel project is also eligible for funding under the funding opportunity and directly supports the work that you're proposing under the funding opportunity, or makes sense as part of, you know, a holistic project. You would also need to describe this parallel project fully as part of the scope of work in the proposal. So you can't, I guess what we want to avoid is to have someone say, yeah, we're also creating a GIS database for, you know, another purpose, and that's going to cost $20,000, and we want that to contribute towards the project as a non-federal cost share contribution. But no more is said. We actually have to take a look at that. We have to have a description of the parallel project. We have to understand the source of funding for the parallel project so we can determine whether it's allowable. And then another thing to keep in mind is that we always have a deadline in our funding opportunities where we say you can include previously incurred costs, but only dating back to, and I didn't look to see what it was in this FOA, but usually, I think it's probably July of 2016.
It's October 1st.
Yep.
October 1st.
Oh, October 1st. Okay. Yeah. So you need to make sure to check that in the funding opportunity and not try to claim costs going way back in time. And then one thing to keep in mind, too, is that anything that you include within the project, it becomes part of the scope of the project that we're funding, and you'll need to report on it as we go forward. Donated services, sometimes people are confused about how to value time that's being contributed. And essentially, you need to look at the work that's being performed and base the value of the work on the actual kind of the going rate for the cost of that work. It's not, I think that some folks might think, oh, I can go ahead and look at a website that might tell me how much volunteered or donated time is worth. It's really not the way to do it. You need to go and look at costs for the actual job that's being performed. And I think the Bureau of Labor Statistics is a good website to go to for that. It's got some of the kind of going rates for different jobs. Outreach. Sometimes we see folks putting in some costs for activities that might be more like public relations or general education activities. And those are not allowable if they're not important and directly supporting the project itself. They're considered overhead and they can't be included. So if you have some outreach that is part of the project itself and it's directed and focused and it makes sense for the project and it's necessary for the project, that may be included. But if it's more general and is just kind of PR or educational, that won't be allowed. Last thing on this point is environmental compliance costs. If your project has some on-the-ground work, maybe monitoring or meters or some field work or something like that, and there's going to be environmental compliance, then you need to include environmental compliance costs in your budget. Next slide. Submitting your application. So this is just, a lot of this is kind of basic stuff, but people get tripped up on it sometimes. So check the page number requirements and the submission deadline. Note that the submission deadline is usually, I think it's 4 p.m. on the day that it's due. So make sure you get it in before then. Check the page numbers. If a proposal goes over the number of pages allowed, we stop reading at the point where the cutoff should be. Register in the system for awards management well before the application deadline. It can take 6 weeks to get registered in that system. So if you haven't done it already for the LCC funding opportunity, I think the advice, and Janine can touch on this at the end, but I believe the advice is to go ahead and submit your proposal hard copy as opposed to trying to use our automated grants.gov system. You need a DUNS number in order to get signed up or set up in the system for awards management. That's just, a DUNS number usually isn't too much difficulty for entities that I think would be applying under the LCC funding opportunity, but sometimes we have really small entities that don't have that yet. Also, you need to register in the system for awards management before you register in grants.gov. Grants.gov is our electronic system for how you submit a proposal. If you're not submitting it hard copy or via the mail or courier or something like that. So you need to register in grants.gov well before the application deadline. If you wait until the last minute, there is likely to be a mistake. We find that it's not always that easy for folks to get set up in grants.gov, so it's important to do this in advance. And I guess our financial assistance folks have pointed out to me that people can submit a proposal a couple days before the deadline to see how it goes, and then later submit their final proposal on the deadline. That's okay. You can just tell us, so you can do that if you want to practice, and you can tell us, hey, please use the last submitted proposal. Let's see. I think that's it on this slide, Ethan. This is just our contact information. If you have any questions as you're preparing your proposal, this is Avra Morgan. Again, I'm the program coordinator for the Policy Office for Reclamation. I can answer programmatic questions. Financial assistance, our official contact for this program is Matthew Reichert, and his number is there below. So if you have technical questions about the budget and about financial assistance requirements, you should call him. But you can call me and I can direct your questions appropriately. I think that's all for the slide presentation. So I can turn it back to Mary now.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Avra and Ethan, for all that information. So the folks that are in the audience, this is the time to ask your questions, and just a reminder how to ask questions. I'd encourage you to ask questions by phone. I just think you might be more clear with your question and get a better answer. But of course, you can type it in and submit it to the science applications host, and that's me, and then I'll read the question to the presenters. So if you would like to ask a question by phone, we'll have to kind of take turns. What you need to do is just, to unmute, press *6, and say your name and ask your question. And then when you're done, when you get your question answered, you can just mute yourself again on your phone by pressing *6. So we're ready for some questions. I don't have anything in the queue or the chat box yet, so we'll just stand by while everybody formulates their questions. I do have one question asking, can we make the slides available? And we'll have the slides as well as the recording posted in the next few days. I have a question from Patrick. Can you clarify that for match? Projects completed no earlier than October 1st, 2016 are eligible.
So, okay, Janine, let's tag team on this. This is Avra. So I believe the question is about contributing in-kind costs for work that's already ongoing when you apply for the grant. And it is correct. Janine clarified that the funding opportunity announcement says that you can only look at costs for work that going back to October 1st of 2016. So any work before that, even if it is directly related and would directly support the project, it's just not eligible to contribute as a non-federal cost share contribution. Janine, do you have anything to add to that?
That's accurate. Yeah, we can't go beyond or ahead of that 10/1 date. So it has to be all costs that were incurred after October 1st of 2016.
Thank you. Somebody asked for the questions, for instructions how to ask a question by phone. All you need to do is press *6 to unmute yourself and then remute yourself or mute yourself after pressing the same thing, *6. And yes, the recording will be available as well as a PDF of the slides. Would anybody like to ask a question by phone?
Hi there.
Okay.
I was just wondering, this is Sandra Hare, and I was wondering about funds that would be going to contractors who would be working on the project. Would they just go through the submitting agency, and is there anything special that we should know about that?
Janine, would you mind responding to that question?
No, I'm just not clear on the question. So if you submit a proposal and a budget and you have a contractor that you're going to have on the project, the funds would go directly to you and you would pay the contractor. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
Okay.
So the contractor sets up an arrangement for payment with the submitting people.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. And is there any other kind of caveats or things that need to be known about using contractors to do work?
Well, working with the contractors, you want to make sure that you follow the Code of Regulations, the CFR 200. So they have cost principles in there, and you have to apply them to your contractors just like we have to apply them to our applicants.
Okay.
We can send you a link for that, too, if you need it.
That would be great.
Okay. Can we do that, Mary?
Yeah, we could type it in right now and send it to everybody via the webinar, or we can include it. I'd like to follow up with everybody when I send the link to the recording and the PDF, so I could include it in there.
Okay.
Whatever you think.
I'll send it to you.
Okay.
Thanks.
You bet.
Thanks you.
Thanks for the question.
Yep.
Hi there. My name is Marcy, and I have a follow-up question to that question regarding how to handle subcontractors with respect to applying indirect costs from the primary grantee's perspective. Where would we find direction on how to the modified cost proposal piece of calculating that?
That's in the CFR as well, and I can direct you directly to that spot. So I'll send that to Mary as well. She can follow up. A contract is limited. You can only apply the indirect rate to the first 25,000. So anything over that would not be eligible for the indirect cost rate.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Hi, Mary and Albert. This is John Bradford with the USGS and Flagstaff. I guess I have a question about the definition of non-federal funds. In particular, I'm thinking about funds that start with the federal government and go to universities as part of cooperative agreements, or funds that go from BIA to tribes. Can we use those as matching funds, or are those excluded as well because of their origin?
They can only be included if by the statute for those funds it allows them to be used as cost share for another federal award.
Okay. I guess I don't know the answer to that about that.
In your proposal, you can ask us to make sure we check that.
Okay.
If you're not sure.
We have a question in the queue from Jeff, and he asks, as a nonprofit, I can put together a team including folks such as NPS, USGS, private contractors. Assistance, services, equipment usage from federal agencies can be counted as in kind, or can assistance, services, equipment usage from federal agencies be counted as in kind?
Can you repeat that one more time? Sorry.
As a nonprofit, he can put together a team of folks, federal folks from agencies such as National Park Service and USGS and other private and private contractors. He's asking, can assistance or services or equipment usage from federal agencies be counted as in kind? I
am thinking no, but I am not positive, so we'll have to follow up with an answer for that one.
So how would you know what, we're just wondering how we're going to follow up with answers to these questions.
Can you send them to Opera? Does Opera, you have your email out there, Opera? Send them to Opera. Yeah. Sorry,
it's on the screen. I wonder if the folks, we can send the CFR link to everybody for specific questions that we need more time to answer. Should we just have them send them to Opera? Would that work?
Is that okay, Opera?
Yes, that's fine with me.
Okay, great. So Jeff, if you could just write down Avra's email that's showing right now on the screen and the phone number, that would be great. And again, I'll include the contact information when I send out the recording and the PDF, but I know some folks maybe want answers sooner than later, so I understand that.
That's a tricky question.
Okay, next question. Anybody on the phone?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. This is Juan Carlos Bravo with Wildlands Network in Mexico, and we're working on a Borderlands project. I'm wondering if activities on the Mexican side of the Borderlands within the Desert LCC are eligible. I missed the first part of the webinar, sorry, so that might have already been explained.
Hi, this is Avra, and we didn't cover that. We should have. Unfortunately, we can't provide funding for activities that are on the other side of the border. We've done some projects in the past where the benefits, I believe, would address a broader geographic scale, but any actual work, as I understand it, has to occur on the U.S. side of the border, unfortunately. We're working on figuring out how to better address the fact that part of the Desert LCC goes into Mexico. And I guess, I don't know if Amanda, or anybody else in our little team, if you have any other comments on that.
This is Amanda. I think you hit it there, Avra. I think you gave a good explanation.
Okay, and as a follow-up question, say, I don't know if modeling of habitat types, corridors, those kinds of things are eligible, and if so, say a model done in the U.S. but that covers part of what's going on in Mexico, do you think that would be an eligible project?
So this is Amanda, and my first inclination is that yes, that would probably be okay, but I would recommend just asking Genevieve Johnson specifically that question. And if you want, Juan Carlos, I can help communicate that question to her for you.
Oh, okay, thank you. Yeah, I can also call her
Okay.
or email her. Don't worry, I've got all her contact information.
Okay, great.
Looking at the amounts that are published in the FOA, it seems to me that you're anticipating grants around $80,000. Are smaller grants encouraged, discouraged, whatever? What can you say about that?
Yeah, so we allow a request of up to $100,000 per project, and there's no preference for, we will certainly consider anything up to that, and if it's, if it's $60,000 or $100,000, it doesn't make a difference in terms of how the project is viewed or how it's reviewed, and, as Ethan said earlier, they're all reviewed against those criteria. So it doesn't, we don't have a preference. It's just the top amount that's allowed is $100,000.
Okay, but smaller projects, less ambitious projects might also be supported if the amounts are appropriate to their goals.
Yeah, that's right.
Cool. Good to know. Thank you. That was my only question.
Thank you. All right, we could take another question via phone, if anybody's ready. Well, team, I have no more questions in the queue to be read. And just a couple more seconds, we'll see if anybody unmutes himself to ask a question. Otherwise, we might start wrapping it up if there are no more questions. Oh, question just popped in from Bill. Would a USGS cooperative research unit at a university still be considered a federal applicant?
Janine, I think the answer is yes, but I don't know for sure.
Is it a CESU that they're talking about? Cooperative
Ecosystem Studies Unit?
Yeah, that's a CESU.
Okay, yes. Yes, they would be.
I think, can you repeat the question one more time?
Yeah, Bill asked, would a USGS Cooperative Research Unit at a university still be considered a federal applicant?
Oh, a federal applicant. Because they're with the USGS. I'm not sure. Have you seen that
we might
before?
need to get back to them on that one.
Yeah.
Okay, Bill, I would send an email to Avra with your questions just so they can track it and get back to you specifically. Okay, Janine sent me an email with the CFR, and I'm going to copy and paste it from my email and just send it to everybody. So we have it. I'll also include some of it in the email I send out with the recording. So here goes. I'm not sure how this will display, but okay, there we go. So folks who are interested in that information can just copy and paste it somewhere, or just open up the browser, that link with your browser, and then you'll have it. You can bookmark it or whatever, however you want to hang on to it. Cool. Okay, to unmute yourself, press *6. Just a reminder. I think somebody wants to ask another question via phone. So we'll hang on. Here we go. Hi. Oh. I heard press *6 again if you're trying to ask a question. Well, we're not getting any more questions, so I think we're going to wrap it up. Avra or Ethan or anybody else on the team, any closing remarks?
I don't think so. Just, you know, please feel free to call us. We're happy to try to answer your questions, and be sure to email the questions that came up that we weren't able to answer. We think it's great when people call us, and, you know, if you want to, any type of question, if you want to talk through what your project is, we can try to, you know, help you see in the FOA, you know, where it might fit, or financial assistance questions. And I just think it's helpful sometimes to actually have a conversation about some of these things if questions are coming up before you submit your proposal. And thanks for taking the time to join us today.
Excellent. So in closing, I would just like to thank the team for being on the phone today and answering the questions and presenting. And then again, another thanks to our audience for attending today. And for those who joined late, just a reminder, I will be sending a link to the webinar as well as a PDF of the slides next week.